Hello, precious mamas and mamas-to-be. Welcome to my mind-opening interview series with important authorities in the birth world. This is your host, Ilka Bee, with the Liberated Birth Movement, broadcasting from around the world. In this interview series, we're going to once again uncover myths, ask interesting questions, and get out-of-the-box answers. Hello, precious ladies. I have the famous Jane Austen today on my team, and I am so excited because she is one of my kind, or better, I am one of her kind, I'd say.
We're in the same tribe.
Exactly. She works with pregnant mamas, helping them prepare for their pregnancy and labor and birth, and that especially with yoga and all the tools that come with yoga. So welcome, Jane.
Thank you very much. I'm so honored to be here. When I got your invitation, I was like a million times yes.
Oh, I am so honored. As I said, I think you are the legend. Like so many, like honestly, years I've heard and read about you, and then I finally in San Francisco, I think Gina Kirby's conference, Flock, which I definitely highly recommend to attend if you're a birth worker, birth keeper, doula, any of that.
Absolutely.
And I got to actually like take a prenatal yoga class with you. And I was like, oh my God, like these are a lot of things that, you know, I do in my prenatal yoga classes, but I got like a whole new spin on it. And you have all this wisdom and years of experience. And so I'm really, really happy to have you on today and share your passion about yoga and pregnancy and, you know, supporting pregnant mamas.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Let me start first with, so obviously you are a prenatal yoga teacher, but tell me a bit more about your background, how you got into it, and what's your passion?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So I basically started working with women in 1990. I did a doula training, and then I went to a birth center and trained to be a midwife, worked in a home birth practice here in San Francisco. So that was pretty much the 90s
I know that.
for me. Yeah. Oh, I've been doing this for a long time.
So you're really freaking young. That's what I can tell you.
Well, thank you, doll. No, I'm exactly my age. I'm 51.
You look great. Damn.
Aw, thanks. Yeah, I feel pretty good. You know, I started this work right out of college. It was a real shift from what I was doing. I have a degree in art. So a shift in that, you know, when I told my father I wanted to be a midwife, he was like, what? I didn't send you to school for that. So, but I worked with Shannon Antone. She has NMI, the National Midwifery Institute. This predates that. But she had a home birth practice in San Francisco, and I was working with her and really found my love and my passion for working with women through the doula work, through the midwifery work, of course. And then, you know, really when I got pregnant myself, I had practiced yoga a little bit, but when I got pregnant myself, there was some seed that was planted when I was practicing, and I literally, and people hear me tell this story, I literally remember what I was wearing, I remember where I was. Wow. And I was hugely pregnant. You know, I'm just like one of those big round pregnant ladies. I'm not like skinny lady with basketball. No, I'm just like Mother Earth. I'm like Gaia herself, right? So I'm this giant pregnant lady, and I just remember being literally in Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2, and like any shame I had about my body, any self-loathing I had about my body, like I'm just getting chills thinking about it. It almost makes me want to cry because it was such a potent moment where I kind of fell in love with myself, you know, and let go of that, all that social conditioning and programming. And, you know, the irony is like I was like the biggest self I could have been. Like I was like my fattest. I mean, pregnant ladies aren't fat, but you know what I mean? Like I was my most expansive physically, And there was something in that moment that made me feel powerful and strong and beautiful.
Wow.
And I only kind of remembered in retrospect, like that a seed was planted then. And I wanted to create conditions for women to have an experience of like unconditional love for themselves, of letting go of all the doubt and the fear and the shit that we all carry around with us all the time, and just create moments of it. So a seed could be planted, you know, just.
Yes, I love this so much.
It's the garden.
The last few days,
I create the garden.
I told my partner I felt like a pimply fat walrus. Okay, I'm 20 weeks today, and like obviously I'm not my biggest as I'm gonna get, right? But there's days, you know, where I feel really good about myself and where I feel like, oh, I'm kind of sexy with all my roundness, right? But
yeah.
So I'm like, oh God, I'm like getting up and I literally feel like a walrus. And so like I feel you, you know, like having the self-love for your, you know, for your own body and for this capability of creating life. And despite everything that society tells us about how
telling us. Yeah. And that we're being fed constantly. I mean, that we're literally being fed constantly. I was at the mall yesterday, walking, you know, through the mall and seeing Victoria's Secret and just being like, you know, it's so pervasive all the time. So, but I love that you said that you felt like a pimply giant walrus, because that feeling's real. You know what I mean? That's a real feeling. So what I love about yoga is that it's not necessarily about like, it's not necessarily about being calm, and not necessarily about being strong or fit or any of those things. It's really the opportunity to sit with yourself as you are, and to be really honest. You know, like some days in pregnancy we feel like a big giant zitty walrus, and other days we feel like earth mama goddess lady. And you know, I want to embrace all of that. I mean, one of the things that I always encourage my mamas is just to really keep it real, be honest with yourself. And it's okay to feel terrible. It's okay to feel ambivalent about like this person that you're growing inside of you. Like all of that is within the realm of normal. And we use the practice to help us create a sense of spaciousness. So there's room for the totality of our experience. So we let go of the should, the expectation, and then in that place, there's an opportunity, you know? So I don't say to my moms like, oh, fall in love with yourself because you're a goddess. You know, I don't say that to them. But do I think they are goddesses? Absolutely. Right. I create a space for them to discover that for themselves, you know, and for those seeds to be planted. And that's so much what I think is the opportunity in yoga. Because even in yoga, I think in the prenatal yoga, like I would literally never tell a woman to breathe love into her belly. Because you know what? What if she doesn't want to? What if she doesn't want to breathe love into her belly in that moment? Do I create conditions for her to connect to her baby so that she can begin to open her heart and breathe love into her belly? You better believe I do. But I always create just the space for her to find that within herself, you know? And I think that's really, I think it's so important because the pregnant women have so many expectations put on them by other people, their family, even themselves, you know? Like maybe she thought she was gonna love being pregnant and she actually fucking hates it. Excuse me. Bleep.
No, we can totally swear on here. Like I'm like, real.
Oh, good.
This is for us to be super real, as you said, creating the space to be real for all the things that are happening in pregnancy. So if we want to swear, then we're going to do it.
Good. I teach my mamas to do this.
I know. I remember doing that with you in your yoga class. Actually, you know what you just said? Like when you just said like breathing love in your belly, like I definitely remember saying that to my pregnant mamas in class. Yeah. Now that you're saying it, like, yeah, maybe she doesn't fucking feel like that in this moment. Yeah. Like, rather, you know, creating the space for her to realize what she needs in this moment, and to, you know, accept it or not accept it in this moment. That's, I like that. Thank you for that.
Well, and that's why I think well, I think some women get turned off of prenatal yoga because they think it's like, oh, it's not for them because they weren't maybe feeling the words that the teacher was saying. And I often say, I mean, obviously you have to have content. You have to know what you're talking about in terms of guiding women safely through pregnancy with postures and breath work. But I often will say, like, it's equally how you teach as to what you teach. Mm-hmm. You know, I think as teachers, we get so focused on what we teach. And the truth is that, yeah, you have to have something to teach, but then create space for women to have their own experience. And even something like the invitation, like I will always say, if you wish, imagine you could see your baby inside your body, right? So there was if you wish. And then if she's like, yeah, I don't really want to do that right now, like, that's okay. Like, there's space for her not to have to do that. If there's, you know, a moment where she's feeling a little disconnect, you know? So it's always, I always feel like yoga is always an opportunity to create that connection, but you can't force it. And if you force it, sometimes women who maybe need yoga more than any other thing in their lives, maybe they don't know it, they'll walk out because, oh, the teacher was too groovy for me. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, what she's saying wasn't really resonating with me. So again, creating that space for women to have their own experience. And then you just like plant the seeds that she could actually fall in love, you know, by just softening, by just allowing yourself to let go. And when you do that, you open. There's a natural opening that happens when we do that. So creating space for women to find their own openings. So it's really on their terms and not on somebody else's terms.
Beautiful. Yeah. What I learned in the last like 20 weeks too is that pregnancy is literally like, it's kind of like an up and down, you know, it's like,
yeah.
And then it's like, you know, it's a connecting and a disconnecting, and there's certain days where I literally talk to my baby, and then there's other days where I'm like, I don't really feel you right now. Where are you?
Right.
What's going on? Right. And I don't really feel, besides a little bit of flattering, 20 weeks, I don't really feel like any kicks or anything yet. So it's like so much trust that comes into this whole experience too. And that's, I think, something that, you know, that we can connect to through the yoga as well. So let me ask you, like, the most powerful question that I usually ask at the end of my interviews, but I wanted to actually start with it because you're so passionate and I just feel like right away. And, you know, obviously we want to keep you around for a long time, Jane, because you have a lot of wonderful things to teach and to share with the world and pregnant mamas and mothers and women in general. But if you, for some reason, would leave this planet Earth tomorrow, and you have one important message to share with the world, what would it be?
Right. Oh God, that's such a hard question to answer because I'm like, I've got a million things. But I guess this really just ties into what I was saying and what we were talking about is like, dare to love. And I think that people are afraid to love because they're afraid they're going to lose. And, you know, a woman who's lost a pregnancy or a child, there's so much guarding that happens. And, you know, and the reason I say dare to love, it's just that dare to be open and to feel, you know, because we have this culture that we deaden our feelings all kinds of different ways, right? Whether it's through excessive everything, excessive Facebook, excessive, you know, pot smoking, or whatever it is. So dare to
me or something.
I did see that cute picture you just posted. So, but I think, you know, dare to feel so that you can actually love and be loved in a way that every single person, even like the shittiest person out there who's like, you know, operating from such a damaged place, like that person needs love. you know, and I always love it, you know, when the phrase that I just heard it first from my friend, Joan Green, and she said, and I'm sure somebody else said this, and this is probably a thing, but, you know, the opposite of fear is not courage, it's love. So what I really encourage women to do is in their labor and birth, like tap into that love, that deep, deep love that we all have. And a lot of us have a lot of mucky things that we have to get through to get to it, but it's so potent. And I don't mean like Pollyanna, like, oh, just love yourself. I mean, fucking do the work. Do the work so you can see yourself, and then you can see where your lens is dirty. That's what yoga really does, is it gives us the opportunity to see our lenses and then clean them so that we can hopefully perceive our life and those of the people around us with a little bit more clarity. Because if we see it that way, then we come to the understanding that everybody deserves love. Everybody deserves love. And the people that we think do not deserve love, those are probably the people that didn't get it. And you know what? They don't think they deserve it either, right? So they're going to lash out at other people because they didn't receive love. Now, of course, there's pathology and there's illness that prevents people from experiencing the love that's all around them too. So it's not just, you know, one factor, but dare to feel, dare to love, dare to be vulnerable. I mean, that's what motherhood's all about.
That is such a powerful message. And, you know, like, I mean, it is if you see it, pregnancy, I mean, it starts all with love. At least that's how it's supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be two people.
Or the intention of it too, depending on how you got pregnant.
Intention of love, you know, coming together and creating this new life, and then, you know, being born into this like cocktail of oxytocin, which is, you know, the
amazing
hormone, right? And then being carried into, you know, love through being fed by the mother, right? And like, it's all a big continuum of love, right? So I really like that you pointed that out, that this is your message. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And that's obviously, and that's in the optimal situation, right? And not everybody has that, you know, like however the pregnancy occurred, whatever your own, I think whatever your own relationship is with your mother. I mean, I teach prenatal yoga teacher trainings, but I also do a prenatal component in yoga teacher trainings. And when you start talking about pregnancy and birth and motherhood, like all of our stuff just like comes
so deep
up.
Yes.
So it's really deep. And whether you have a sweet relationship with your mother or a crappy relationship with your mother, or you were undermothered, or your mother you know, died when you were young, or whatever your story is, like it's so potent. And that's where, like, that radical place of allowing yourself to feel that and to look at that. In yoga, we have a concept that's called swadhyaya, which is basically looking at yourself, you know, just not without judgment, but just seeing what's there, right? And are your actions and the ways that you're in the world, are they creating suffering for yourself, for the people around you? And if that's true, maybe you have the opportunity to kind of tap into something that is going to give you buoyancy in those times where you feel like you're being pulled under. And I feel like for me personally, like showing people that the practices of yoga can literally be like a buoy that you can hold on to when you feel like you're going to, you know, hit the bottom of the ocean, or a lifeboat that you can crawl into when the waters are really rough, because we're human. The waters are rough, you know, and everybody has their own story. But I've just found that yoga has given me a place where I can have the tool, cultivate the tools to use off the mat in my day and in my life. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm so passionate about bringing yoga to just mamas everywhere, and whatever capacity that they can use the tools of yoga, you know, and women come into yoga all the time when they're pregnant. It's sort of like a entry point, whether they like, whenever a woman comes to my class, I always say, oh, have you done yoga before? Yeah, but a long time ago. Or no, I've never done it before. Super, super common answers. And I always say, oh, well, I'm so glad you're here today. You've made that decision and that choice to be here today. So the prenatal practice is often a window for women to go through. And then once the doors open for many women, they continue on their yoga discovery because they've walked through that prenatal door.
Totally. They get hooked. I remember I was just reading through somewhere, like I was gathering some testimonials from my website or whatever, and there's one mama saying, the one thing I really regretted when I had my baby was I can't attend prenatal yoga anymore. And I was like, oh my
I know.
More than just yoga, right? It's community, and it's what you said,
it is.
Tools that mamas take into motherhood, and that help them to find more balance, to find more self-love and acceptance for themselves, and just strength, not just physically, also mentally and soul and spirit.
Well, and not feeling so crazy. I mean, the thing is, I think pregnant women feel crazy a lot. And I had one woman on Wednesday say, oh, I just feel so bitchy all the time. And I said, kind of a show of hands, there's like 35 ladies in the room or whatever. I said, how many of you are feeling bitchy all the time? And like a bunch of hands went up. And then, then we laugh and we're like, oh, yeah, like other women experience, have these experiences too. And that validation is it's so helpful because, we kind of see the world through our own lens, and it looks like everybody's freaking loving pregnancy and looking fabulous. At least, what we see online and all of that. And, oh, she just looks like she's sailing through her pregnancy. And other women are, experiencing something really different from that. So to have this point of validation, I just think it's so helpful. And I had one mom a little while ago, probably 6 or 7 months ago at this point, she said that literally in her labor, she visualized all the women in the prenatal yoga room. And that helped her, and it gave her strength, and it gave her fortitude, and gave her that sense that she wasn't alone. Like, oh my God, like that to me, like that, I'm like, oh my God, that like, that's so humbling. It's so humbling that she felt that in the yoga class, because we do have the opportunity to create sacred space, not because you say it is, and again, I don't say, come on into the sacred space, ladies. I just hold that space with so much reverence and love. And women cry all the time in prenatal yoga. And I just, I always tell them that there are millions of tears in this room and on this floor, that these are sacred waters. And, thank you for, blessing the room and also being willing to be vulnerable. And, that lady cries, and then, that lady's going to cry right next to her. It's a domino.
Like, you saw a nice picture I posted earlier of being like 20 weeks pregnant and looking all spiffy, right? But like, I had a total breakdown this morning. I came out of the shower, and like I looked at myself in the mirror, and I literally had to be held by my wonderful partner Frankie for like an hour, because I was like, I am afraid. I feel fear right now, and he's like, what are you afraid about? I'm like, well, there's a lot of things, but like one of them is my body changing, right? And like, all of a sudden my boobs are out of control, and like I'm just like looking different, and then I saw my friend.
My ass! Oh my God! Look what's happening to my ass!
My friend Christina just had a little baby boy, and I saw her picture on Facebook, and like in this moment I was like, oh my God, it's just a few more months, and then there is another being with me. That, I'm turning 37. I'm kind of like an old mom, so I've had a lot of time in my life by myself. So there's all these fears coming up, and it literally, like, I took like 14 different napkins to, blow my nose, and then Right? It totally happens, and we need to like give ourselves space to experience that. And I'm missing my a lot right now. So I appreciate saying this, holding space for the moms to just
yeah, and think about you. You do this work. You're totally in this community. You have such reverence for pregnant women, and you know the potency and the power of all of this work. And even you,
yeah. Oh yeah, that's what I said.
Human, and like have these feelings. Yeah. So I think that when we let go, even as like, you know, groovy people, when we let go of how we think we're supposed to be. And, you know, it's so funny because sometimes I get a little surly in my classes and I swear a little bit or whatever. And people will be like, oh, you know, I just didn't even know that yoga teachers were like that. I was like, yoga teachers are people too, with teenagers that make them swear. So I just think it's so funny. And I love relaying stories in my class just about motherhood, like, you know, whatever, going down the path of motherhood. So I have a 20-year-old, almost 21. My daughter turns 21 next month.
Wow.
Which means that I am going to be the mother of a full-fledged adult. I mean, she's been adulting for a long time.
Officially.
Word adulting.
Yes.
But she's always been very, very mature. So it's not like I had to like coddle her through her early adulthood, but she's going to be 21. So that is such a big deal and such a marker and a shift and a change. So that's cool. And then I have a 17-year-old boy who's still in the nest and he's yummy.
That means, Jane, 21 years of you also discovering yourself of being a mother, right?
Yeah. And there's like really amazing mom moments and really, really, really crappy mom moments. So, you know, I'm really honest with my students, you know, like there will be times that you will feel like, wow, I'm a great mom and I made some really good choices. And there'll be other times that you're like, wow, I'm a sucky mom and I made some really bad choices. And like, that's all part of it. And that's where we allow ourselves to feel that. And then we love ourselves anyway. Just like love yourself anyway, you know, warts and all, as they say.
And how has yoga helped you through these moments, especially the ones that were rough and hard and where you maybe feel shitty or guilty or whatever?
Well, just prioritizing getting to my yoga mat and not necessarily like going to a yoga class. Because I think sometimes we think, oh, I can't do yoga because I don't have time.
Right.
Well, if your excuse is I can't do yoga, I don't have time, then maybe you don't even know what yoga is. Because what my teacher's teacher says is that, so Krishnamacharya says that if you can breathe, you can do yoga. Yeah.
God, sometimes like just sit in front of my altar and just take a couple deep breaths and center myself again first.
Yeah. And do you feel better when you do that?
World. Yes. You know what? And it's like the thing that's like, it's readily available for us, right? We don't have to stand in line. We don't have to get it on Amazon. We don't have to.
Right. We don't have to pay $25.
Right there in abundance, the breath. Yeah.
So I think like really making what I find is that making that link from like, if you know I've got a mama in class that we're doing a yoga practice, and what we're doing in this class is really honing the tools of yoga so that we can use them in our lives, and we can use them when we're off the mat and really practice. So I teach in mamas what's called a tapas practice. And tapas, there's many definitions of the word, but it's basically a discipline or effort. And the particular practices that I teach are really, really, they're challenging. They're hard. I actually have the moms keep their arms lifted for like 5 minutes, right? So it's really hard. And you have the opportunity when you're doing, something, when you're doing something that's challenging to really, what's that?
They need the strength to later on to carry the baby around.
Oh yeah, they gotta carry that kid around. You know, they've gotta, but also being able to in that moment to use their breath so that they can traverse those waters. So that like when their toddler is screaming and their newborn is screaming, instead of her screaming also, maybe she can take a moment find her breath, and then figure out like what she needs to do. And the thing is that the amazing thing is that if we're not told that, we don't know. And I remember early on, I taught childbirth education for years. I taught over 15 years. I taught a home birth specific childbirth education class, like, you know, every Monday night all the way through the year. I probably taught 10 series a year or something, maybe 12. I don't know. A lot, like a lot. And, you know, early on, I would teach things and I wouldn't necessarily like make the link. Like I would teach this and this with the assumption that people could make the link. And sometimes they couldn't make the link. Like I would, you know, we would come back for the reunion and people would be like, oh, well, nobody taught me how to breathe. I'm like, I did, you know? So I realized that like we have to literally tell women, this is something that you can use in your labor. Yes. This is something that will help you, you know, in that postpartum period. So that they're making that link and that connection. And I figured that out pretty early on, but it was a really interesting thing for me to discover that as a teacher, I mean, yeah, you have to plant the seeds, of course, but sometimes you have to build the bridge also so that your students can really understand that what you're teaching is specifically feel better or use this tool when it comes time for the second stage of labor or use this tool in early labor or whatever you're teaching them at any given time. But I was always surprised that sometimes that bridge needed to be built. Now, I've been teaching since 1990, so I've figured it out.
This is like
been teaching a long time.
Partial
What's that?
That's like a partial answer to my next question, which was like, you know, what are the specific benefits that mamas have for pregnancy and labor that prenatal yoga gives them? And I believe like the breath is one of the most important things. I was just talking to Frankie last night about, he's like, so how is yoga helping women in labor, right? Like, why is a warrior two gonna, like, he couldn't make that connection, right? Until
right.
Well, you know, it's like labor, even though, you know, some women have figured it out to not be very painful, but it is comfort after all, right? And to, like, you can't just get out of it. You can't make that contraction or wave or rush, however you want to call it, stop in that moment. So you have to like sit with that discomfort and you have to let yourself surrender to that. And so the breath helps so much in that moment to, you know, really just let your body go into this experience instead of trying to escape it.
Yeah. And well, in yoga, we talk about the balance of effort and surrender. And so that you have, you know, we say like it's the two wings of a bird, right? So it can't be just all effort, you know, you like wear yourself out all the time. And it can't be just surrender or you wouldn't actually do anything. So you have to have the balance of the two. And that's so pertinent also in labor because the body, like there's so much effort in our body. When our women give birth, I mean, your uterus is like, rah, effort. So our job is to soften around that effort, right? So it's the same principle, right? And then, you know, I think sometimes we're sort of set up to be victimized by our labors and our births. And women are kind of programmed to believe that their bodies are inherently dangerous for their babies, right? And that their babies need to be rescued.
By the doctor.
Rescued by the doctor because their body is a death trap, you know? And to let, I know. Women actually believe that, you know? And I feel like in yoga, they have the opportunity to, I mean, it's funny that you used the warrior two. So I told you my story, my own story, but also I see women in the room when we're doing, warrior two is a power pose, right? It's a power pose. So when I see women doing that pose, I'm like, do it like you mean it. Like use this pose to help you tap into that place of power. And then use this pose, you know, another pose to help you tap into that place of surrender and let go so that you have both of those tools at your disposal when it comes time for birthing your baby. So I would say absolutely every single thing about prenatal yoga is preparation for childbirth and motherhood. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, this is not, this is. It's like, no, it all is. It all is, because you're giving women the opportunity to listen and pay attention. So one thing I don't do is I don't teach like, oh, your first trimester, do this pose. Your second trimester, do this pose, or do it this way. Like, oh, your third trimester, like do a standing poses on a chair. Like, you tell a yogini in her third trimester to do all of her standing poses on a chair, you know what she's going to do? Not come back to your class. She's going to be like, I'm out. Because it's also not really taking into account how a woman is feeling in that moment.
Totally.
So I always use language like, you know, if your back is feeling a little fatigued or tired, take this variation. Back feels like it's stronger and you want a little bit more of a challenge, take this variation. So always using the language of the class to help her decide what feels good to her. I can't think of anything more disempowering than somebody telling you to do something that's not relevant to your experience. You know, like, and then you're just supposed to do it because they said to do it. Like, that sounds like a terrible reason to do something just because your teacher said.
Oh my God, that's exactly the topic that I just talked about with Hermine. I don't know if you know her.
Oh, I do. Yes, of course.
A lawyer and an advocate from, you know, maternity care, and she was just
globally. Yes.
You know, how you can't just let other people tell you, and you can always say no, right? And I feel like that's something that we learn through yoga too, is to not just listen to that teacher out there. You know, for me,
right.
I was a teacher, I was never pregnant before, right? So I had to tell my students, well, you need to listen to yourself, what feels good to you, you know, according to your experience, according to how far along you are, according to how you're feeling today, right? It's
right.
You got to listen really to that body and how do you feel in that specific moment and what feels good to you. Maybe you need to do a couple more push-ups to really, like, you know, get yourself into that space, and maybe you just need to like chill out in child's pose for a moment and just breathe.
Yeah.
Feel, right? So
absolutely.
It's an opportunity to really like tune into your own body and what you really need, and like listen to what you truly need instead of just listening to what someone on the outside tells you.
Right.
That then,
well, and we see that all the time in pregnancy. I mean, there's this like the don't list, like don't invert, don't twist, don't like lie on your belly, like all these things that women are kind of constantly always told, but they're not really told why that would even be an issue. So one of the things I do is just talk to women about like what are the issues, like deep twisting later in pregnancy could probably, you know, strain the round ligaments, you know, strain the ligaments that are supporting your uterus. So, you know, twist only as deeply as it feels good. You know, it's like, you know, when someone says, oh, pregnant women shouldn't twist, it's like, wow, that is a normal function of the spine to twist. So they're supposed to like not twist like their whole pregnancy? That's ridiculous. Sometimes twisting feels great. But you know, it's sort of this like liability issue about like, you know, you don't want to, you know, put yourself out there that way. And I'm like, you know what? I think women need to take responsibility for themselves. And ultimately, that if they're really inquiring about what feels good and what doesn't, and it's not guided by ego, I'm going to trust that they're making decisions and choices that are appropriate for them and their baby. So I trust them over anybody, because if a woman's really acting from that place of really of being honest with herself, she's going to make good choices. That's just my experience. You know, people will be like, women shouldn't plank. Be totally fine, you know, and I'd give the conditions. Uh-oh, did you lose me?
Yeah, I can still hear you. You were just hanging a little bit, but you were freezing for a second. Now you have a funny face, actually. Okay, let's see what's happening here.
Are you back?
Okay, I'm back. I don't know. I told you, it's Spanish internet, but I stopped.
Yeah. It just said unstable internet and then you froze. Yeah. So
yeah,
I don't know if I was frozen.
Yeah, you had a really funny face while you were actually.
I kept talking. I just kept talking. I was like, that's all right. I'll just keep talking. I know, my kids are so funny. They're like, Mom, talk about childbirth so your eyeballs can pop out of their head.
Oh my God.
They get very excited.
My heart rate is actually like going up at least 10 to 15 when I start talking about birth and pregnancy. And
but, I know, I start sweating a little bit.
You know, the wonderful thing about, you know, I've been doing some of these interviews with, you know, all types of people right now, but they're all very passionate about this topic.
Yeah.
You know? It is because it is such a life-altering experience, and not just for the baby, right? It's like only has one birth available in its life, but also for the mother and therefore the family and the relationship and the society in general, right? It's such a, you know, we're asking ourselves, like, where's all this violence in our world coming from? Where is all this disconnect coming from? Where's all this mental illness coming from, right? And like, if we're tracing it all the way back, it starts with not loving ourselves. And where does that come from? Well, because we have all these terrible experiences in childbirth, right? So people that are working in this field are generally very, very passionate about it, and you can feel that passion through the screen. And I really enjoy, you know, speaking to people like you and, you know, Hermine, just because I know, like, you know, you're doing such great work that will help so many moms and pregnant women to just have a different outlook on what this journey is all about. And it's a journey of, you know, spiritual growth, you know. Okay, back to a couple of questions, right? We were talking about, you know, the physical benefits and aspects of yoga, right? I want to ask you a little bit more about that, because I know that a lot of my moms in yoga class often like told me, you know, oh my God, like I had such a back pain, right? And like, oh, it helped me so much, or my hips were really me. So there is a real physical aspect that really helps women to get through aches and pains, especially in the, you know, late second and third trimester. It also, you know, I feel helps them really to give like physical strength and endurance to actually go through a 15-20 hour birth. And then you know, mental and spiritual aspects that you mentioned already that are not just for birth, labor and birth, but also that, you know, last so much motherhood.
Of course.
Life.
Of course. Of course.
Of these two aspects of what prenatal yoga, why every woman actually needs prenatal yoga. Funny thing, I was just in my group making a little poll about what women want to talk about, and obviously I put prenatal yoga on there, and only a few women were clicking that option. I was like, God damn, they have no idea how much this is actually like helping them to prepare for, you know, further birth, and especially if they want to have a, you know, intervention-free and pain medication-free birth, or maybe a home birth, right, where they don't have the options of you know, having an epidural or something like that.
Yeah, well, certainly it can serve women regardless of what their birth experience is. I mean, I think that sometimes women might have that idea of like, oh, if I do prenatal yoga, like what if I want an epidural? Like I don't need to do prenatal yoga because I know I want medication in birth or something like that. Or I'm having a cesarean birth. Right. You know, I think that sometimes there's that expectation. And my argument would be that really yoga can prepare you to have a more, for lack of a better word, a holistic experience, whether you have a vaginal birth or a cesarean birth. And it gives you the opportunity to look at what you really need to give birth, right? Because I think that we have this culture that women are told that birth is something that just happens to them. You know, and the truth is that your labor and birth is you. It's actually you. Now, obviously, if somebody's pumping you with Pitocin, somebody else is putting their story on your experience. And if you have a cesarean birth, the surgeon plays a role, obviously. But I think there's so much of our willingness to sort of surrender our experience because we think that if we do everything that we're told, that we get guaranteed a good income, a good outcome, not income, good outcome. And the thing is, there's no guarantee. You know, you can do everything the doctor says and you could still end up with a sick baby in your arms. You could do everything your doctor says and you can end up with empty arms. And, you know, I think that that's such, and to say that to a pregnant lady, I know that that's hard to hear, but I also think it's really important for those of us that work in the birth world to be able to hold the totality of women's health experience is and what the outcome is so that she can hopefully feel better in the process. So what I mean by that is, you know, what I really think that all women need in their birth, regardless of how their birth actually looks, is that they need to feel respected, that their decisions and choices are being honored, right? She needs to feel safe, right? She needs to feel protected, that she has a safe birthing environment. And obviously some women will feel safe in the hospital, some women will feel safe at home. And then thirdly, she needs from, you know, like if I look at it and wish for women to have kind of their optimally positive experience, is that she needs to be connected to herself, to her baby, to the people around her that love her and that support her. So if a woman comes out of her birth experience with those three things intact, that she feels protected, she feels respected, and she feels connected, like regardless of what the birth looks like, she can feel whole after the experience. Because so many women come through that experience, those things are not intact and they are not whole. They are shattered by the experience. And if we can really help her use the tools of yoga to help her keep those things intact. And I think it's so funny because people think that prenatal yoga is gentle yoga, and I just laugh. I'm like, labor is not necessarily gentle, and motherhood sure the shit is not gentle. So you need to fortify yourself.
Whenever I taught, like, you know, some of the sequences that I taught in my prenatal class to like normal classes, and sometimes there were men attending in the class.
Yeah.
Come on. This is what I do with my pregnant ladies, and like ladies that are like 40-week pregnant, they can hold this pose. They're like, oh my God, this is really hard stuff, right? So
yeah.
It's not always gentle.
Not always gentle, but you know, just to get back to your question also about the prenatal yoga, that it you know, like if we're going to a regular yoga class when you're pregnant, you absolutely can. But what happens is that you end up kind of modifying yourself to fit the practice, right? As opposed to the practice being specifically designed for you, you know, and that's why I'm a big advocate of women going to prenatal classes. Now, I know sometimes, like, you know, maybe there's not prenatal classes in your area or prenatal classes that you can afford, or, you know, whatever your reasons aren't. But that's one of the reasons I'm training teachers, because I want women to have access, all women to have access to this, you know, really, really powerful tool. I also think that the fact that yoga came out of India and Hinduism is often superimposed over yoga, that can be a real turnoff for some women because they think that yoga might be a religion, or that I'm going to make them chant to Ganesha or something like that. And I think that also might be like, oh, I'm Christian, I can't do that, or oh, I'm not Hindu, I can't do that. And actually, yoga is quite secular in its very foundation. I teach from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, and the Yoga Sutra is not Hinduism at all. Right. So, I mean, I love the iconography of Hinduism and the beautiful deities, and I've got deities in my home, and I appreciate all of that. But I'm really, really aware that I'm not Hindu. I don't have my students chant to Hindu deities. I don't, and because I know that is something that might make somebody not be comfortable coming to class. Now I teach the Yoga Sutra and it's all like woven through. It's almost like, I think of like how I teach as a tapestry. And I've got little threads of Yoga Sutra kind of going through, little threads of lessons that I learned from Ina May, lessons that I learned from the women that I've been to, their labors and births, lessons of like senior people in the birth world, you know, the women that are a couple generations above me, you know, so all of that tapestry is brought in to my teaching and into that space. And it's never an insistence that they, you know, chant to, you know, Lakshmi or whatever, even though Lakshmi is beautiful.
And at the end, they're just principles of living, right?
Yeah.
It's that can be adapted to any sort of religion or way of living, or however. It's not something that's actually dogmatic.
No, not at all. And it was written very specifically to be open. I do a weekly Yoga Sutra study group with my teacher, and I had just had it this morning. And that's what I love so much about it, is such a deep, rich text. I mean, we're studying the 4th chapter now and been all the way through. And then we're always like, what are we going to do when we get done with the 4th chapter? We're like, we're going to go back to chapter 1 and start all over again, because the layers get revealed as as our lives evolve, and we tell, you know, we share stories and talk about how the sutras impact our life, how we are in relationship with ourselves and those people around us. I mean, one of the things I love to really plant the seed for the pregnant ladies in the prenatal class is that they are at the beginning of a relationship. You are at the beginning of a relationship. And most people find that relationship
cry all of a sudden.
And that relationship can fundamentally change how you are in relationship to the people around you, to your partner if you have one, to your friends, your family, your community. But most profoundly, I found, is that it changed my relationship to myself. Because we have to look at ourselves when we're walking this path of parenting, because there's going to be things that we want to share with our children, and things that we've learned along the way to try to make their path as smooth as possible. And then we're just going to put a ton of our own background. Oh my God, that is so cute. Hello, I see you.
Oh, nice.
So, just creating space. I mean, I teach actually a partner yoga workshop. It's a 3-hour birth prep workshop, and it's really based on like what I taught in childbirth ed for years, but it's really to help the birth partner really show up for the mama, you know, and they often want to be able to do that, but they don't necessarily know how. And so much of the preparation is like, oh, read a book, or, you know, or go to the hospital classes where they just like give you the anatomy of labor and birth. Well, it's good to know that for sure, of course. Right. But, and I taught that for years, but it's also really important to know that your partner, if you're in a relationship that has some skills of communication, like knows you. And knows what you like, and hopefully knows how to make you feel better. So I use the workshop really as a tool to empower a woman, if she has an intimate partner, to really tap into what they already know about her, what they already know about themselves, so that they can really show up for her in the birth process. So I teach it once a month. It's super fun. It's one of my favorite things that I do, because it's often, I mean, obviously not everybody has a partner, not everybody has a male partner, but if it's like a dude, like the reluctant dude who's never done any yoga, I'm like, oh, you are my specialty.
Totally.
I've just been doing this for a long time. So, you know, I know how to like talk to those people. So super fun for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm super excited to share this with people too, how they can reach you and to maybe, take part of one of these classes. I felt I also did a similar thing. I called it a yoga date night, and it was on Friday night, and we did like
awesome.
and like feed each other with chocolate and strawberries and yoga, and it was really interesting, to get the feedback of the partner that usually doesn't come to yoga class. Occasionally there was a partner showing up in yoga class, which was hilarious. But these things are wonderful for couples to bond. And honestly, like, I personally believe birth belongs to couples. Much more than it belongs to any care provider, if that is a doula or a midwife or a doctor or a nurse, right? It's like, the baby is, will be growing up in that partnership, and is hopefully created in that love of this partnership. So, and as you said, your partner should usually know better than anyone else, even better than your doula, right? Like what you want and need and like. And so like having your partner not being afraid to step up and to hold space for you, I think something really wonderful and amazing. And to teach, I say men, and obviously, as you said, not everyone has a male partner, so partners in general, but especially men that don't have that experience of going through pregnancy and don't have a uterus and don't have a baby grow inside of them, just to just tap into that energy, in that birth energy, and to hold space for their partner going through this. Like, I mean, most of the time, as I said, my friend Christina just had her baby, and her partner's like, oh my God, she's my queen. Like, I have such respect for her, like how strong and powerful she is. And it's like, that's exactly the experience that, that the couple gets out of that when they go through this together. So highly recommend going to one of your workshops for sure.
Yeah, well, I have them online too, which isn't as good as like in person, but you can find that all at janeaustenyoga.com.
That is my very last question before I let you go into your evening. And how can people reach you? How can we learn more from you? How can we attend classes in person? I know you're in California.
I'm in San Francisco. Yeah.
But you say you also have online classes, so how?
Yeah, you can find all of that on my website. I've got online classes. I've got my workshop online. I've got a phone app with Move With, and I'm always adding content on that. And, I'm kind of building my online presence a little bit. I've been really, really dedicated to showing up for my students in my classes. I teach about 200 women a week. So, yeah.
Wow.
On Saturday, I literally have 50 pregnant ladies in my class.
Holy moly. Imagine, the classes I taught were much smaller. I was always I have like 18 or 20 women in my class, but like, imagine the power and the energy.
I know.
50 pregnant women in there, and 50.
It's a little crazy. It's a little crazy. I've just been doing it for so long, and women who, they hear about me or they get pregnant again, and so I just have a
Austin is the legend. I'm telling you.
Well, I have a really big student base, and I always joke that if you live in San Francisco and if you don't want to do yoga with me, you have to actively avoid me. Like oh no, here comes Jane Austen, So it's just, I'm so passionate about it. And one of the things that I really have done over the years is showed up for my students. I'm raising my kids in San Francisco, so it wasn't like, oh, I was traveling to India every year. I was actually teaching yoga. So, people were like, how did you get such a big student base? I was like, because I taught yoga on Saturday and Sunday for like a decade. So, that pays off. You get students, you get a reputation, and now my kids are a little older, they're out of the nest. I went to China last month and taught my teacher training, which was mind-blowing. I did it last year too. It's crazy to try to teach this in a completely different culture. So a lot of lessons were learned by me. Wow. About how to present like the potency of this information with a culture that has a completely different set of values. Some of them are the same, but so it was really, really interesting. So I'm just starting to tap into the waters of international travel and teaching, which is really exciting. That's really exciting. But I'm also, you can find me at Prenatal Yoga with Jane Austen on Facebook. Jane Austen Yoga on Instagram. So I post things. If you want to go to my website and get my newsletter, I usually try to focus on some good little tidbits. So my newsletter is not just marketing promo.
I gotta get on your newsletter. Hell yeah.
Oh yeah. Check it out. Yeah. So I do it about quarterly. It's not something I do all the time, but I focus on the latest books, like that new 4th trimester book that Kimberly Ann Johnson came out with, which is amazing.
I got it in my shelf. Yes, great book.
Amazing. And she's really speaking truth to how pregnant women are abandoned once they have their babies. And I teach a postnatal class too. I teach 3 postnatal classes a week, and it's just filling a void for women. And you know as well as I know is that at least in the States, women basically get no postpartum care, like one visit, Yeah, it's amazing. Like, women come to my postnatal class, and of course they've had like one visit, unless they're seeing a midwife, which of course I encourage that if that's what they're interested in. I always have lots of resources around that. But, their abdomen has not been checked for diastases, for rectus diastases, like hardly any of them. So I check probably, I would say anywhere between 10 and 15 women a week. I check their abdomen to make sure that their abdominal muscles are coming back together so that what I'm teaching them in the postnatal class is going to be appropriate for them. And I'm starting to do like more work outside of pregnancy for pelvic floor health and healthy pelvic floor function, which is so great that there are yoga teachers globally that are really addressing the issue of pelvic floor dysfunction for women, so that we can really begin to connect to those foundational muscles in our bodies. So that's kind of where I'm going. I'm kind of on the continuum. I'm still totally in the pregnant lady landia, but as my body makes the changes through menopause, I'm finding myself drawn to that community, my community as well. So I'm definitely women's health all along the spectrum. I'm doing a great retreat at this place called 1440 in the Santa Cruz Mountains, brand new fancy place. So it's a pelvic floor workshop. I'm so excited.
I think one of my teacher friends actually just took a pelvic floor workshop with you, and she was just like blown away by it. She's like, Ilka, you gotta go and take this workshop, because honestly, like, because of all the trauma women have through childbirth, episiotomies and, like epidurals and coached pushing in the hospital and all of these things, there is a real true need for women in postpartum to as well address, the pelvic floor and to strengthen this. And, I always say, like, it is not normal that you pee your pants when,
Oh, yeah, of course.
Very important work that you're doing there as well, not just prenatally, but also, postpartum. And
postpartum, and or even with women that have never had babies. I did a pelvic floor workshop a few months ago at this point, and I had 2 70-year-old women in the workshop. I mean, it was so awesome, and they were just excited to get that information. It's information that we don't have. And what I'm realizing now more and more, because most of the obstetricians coming out of med school are women, and they're really beginning to realize that what they have been offering to women in the field of obstetrics is completely inadequate. Unless there is a surgical solution, which the surgical solutions are terrible, then women get basically no education and care around their pelvic floor function. So I think the tide is turning. I think the tide is really turning.
Jane, so much learned from this, so much great.
Ilka, thank you so much for having me.
No, really, like I mean, you make me really like miss my own yoga community. I've been, traveling for the last, I don't know, 9 months or something almost. But I'm like finally settling here in Spain for a little while, and like I need to find my yoga community again.
Right, you gotta find your tribe.
Yes, it's literally the tribe. I've already connected with groups, yoga groups online in Tenerife. But yes, it is so important. Community, the physical benefits pregnant women get from this, the mental and spiritual connection they get from this, so much.
Absolutely.
And I thank you for your work, and thank you for your passion. Like it literally like it comes through the screen, and I can't wait and spread it all.
Oh, good.
Please.
Well, I love what you're doing. I mean, I love what you're doing as well. I'm fired up to hear the other speakers that you have, and I just think that it's such great work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you as well. Enjoy your evening, and we'll talk.
Thank you. Namaste. Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you, ladies, for joining us to this great interview. If you enjoyed this, please follow the Liberated Birth Movement on Facebook or subscribe to our channel. If you have more questions how to apply these ideas to your pregnancy and birth, schedule a call and we'll get you clear on what you want and how to get it. meetme.so/liberatedbirth. meetme.so/liberatedbirth. Always remember, birth belongs to women.